This live stream brought to you by the Excelsior Citizen and these generous sponsors. Our Excelsior Springs Hospital, where better care is right in your backyard. The Simmons Sales Team, your hometown realtors.
Whether we're talking about our dedication to preventing and restoring power outages, our pursuit of safety, or providing the best member experience possible, we are relentless in serving our communities.
Find out how you can advertise with Excelsior Springs' #1 community resource. Visit excelsiorcitizen.com today.
I was in a real cop car today.
You weren't the hiding one?
No. Was it all black out? I was in the like all black. I was like, oh. I was like, where did you come from? I just didn't want you to cry when you got out and saw. I know.
I can't hide anymore in my car, so I gotta be real good.
Yeah, this is very nice.
Right blue. I stick out.
Yeah.
Blue Hellcats. It's like I can't hide them anyway.
Yeah, we might probably
So, great. I will be like 30 seconds then. You can just read my report. It's all in your report right in front of you.
Yeah, and I was like,
Hi.
and then they have this little heading out back, and it's like,
I guess Bryce is gonna watch Paige's dogs next week. She's so excited. They worked all the details out. She goes, no parties at Coach Paige's house. Bryce is
All right, we're
like,
going to get the
it's
meeting
me.
started. Call the meeting to order. This time I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. First by Kalen, second by Troy. All those in favor? And that passes 7-0. This time, if you will join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, this time I'd entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda. So first by Troy. Second. Second by Darren. All those in favor? And that passes 7-0. Next up, item C, MSBA delegate report.
Darren got a great video.
Welcome to the June edition of the Missouri School Boards Association's Board Report. We begin with a look back at the legislative session that wrapped up last month. Education issues dominated headlines and talking points throughout this year's session. MSBA's Director of Outreach, Caitlin Whaley, says that this year's session was unusual from start to finish.
The 2024 legislative session was a bit odd, I think, to kind of sum it up. We started off with a lot of bills, a historic number of bills filed, thousands of bills, and both in the education realm and just overall, it became clear semi-early on that the number of bills actually passed was going to be very few. So specific to education, you saw that narrow down to Senate Bill 727 extremely quickly, and that became almost the entire focus of all of the major education was what was and was not in 727, and overall, just very few bills passed. I think including the budget, it was like 49 bills, which is exceptionally low when you're starting from 5,000.
Caitlin says that with the passage of Senate Bill 727, there are now more issues that school board members will need to be aware of going into the next budget year and legislative session.
And we will be continuing to put out both policy and general guidance on what 727 means in practice and practicality. A lot of what is in 727 is budget related, and so that is going to be a fight for next year, is to fight that you need to fund all of these additional mandates that we put on school districts, the teacher salary increases, and you can't fund them at the expense of things like the foundation formula and transportation. We have to have that overall net increase in funding to keep it from being a huge local tax increase on our school districts.
And although the session is over, Caitlin says it's still important for board members and administrators to stay in touch with legislators, and also noted the outstanding outreach efforts of school board members this past session.
I'm new to MSBA, but I was absolutely floored by the outpouring of support and enthusiasm for advocating on these issues. We had so many board members and districts step up and voice their opinions and concerns, do that outreach that we were asking of them, because I know Brant will say it and I will say it and Mike will say it. Legislators want to hear from people in their districts, and it's much more meaningful for them to have a conversation with somebody that lives in their area and represents their local school districts than it is for the MSBA advocacy team in Jefferson City. So your work was absolutely noticed. We got feedback from the governor's office. They were very impressed by the amount of outreach that they received. And so every time we conduct that outreach, we're laying groundwork that school board members are a trusted voice and a trusted advocate in public education, and we can continue to build that up as a resource going forward.
MSBA's positions on state and federal education issues are determined by the Delegate Assembly that will be meeting this coming October. If your school board has a position statement on an issue you would like to submit to the Advocacy Committee for consideration, you can do so this summer. The Advocacy Committee reviews those proposals and makes recommendations to the Delegate Assembly that determines MSBA's positions on these issues. Make your plans now to attend the 2024 MSBA Annual Conference in cooperation with the Missouri Association of School Administrators and the Missouri Association of School Business Officials. The event will once again feature some outstanding general session speakers, along with a wide variety of concurrent sessions, many presented by school leaders from districts throughout the state. Registration information for the conference will be posted on the MSBA website soon. And past and present members of local school boards can be nominated for the 2024 Paul Morris Community Service Award. The award is for those who have shown an outstanding commitment to local community service. Nominations will be accepted through June 28th, and the award will be presented at the MSBA Annual Conference. That's it for this month. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and we'll see you in July for the next MSBA Board Report.
Anything further?
Yeah. Our Region 4 Fall Meeting is September 4th and will be held at Platte County. We'll get more information once that date's closer. And then they just talked about the annual conference this year is the 17th and the 19th in October. Lisa will get all of this scheduled for it and up ready for it. If you can't go, please tell Lisa.
17th through the 19th?
Yep. So 18th and 19th, the 17th is always that first training day for new board members.
All right. No visitors? All right, moving on to discussion action items. First up, Dr. Tomlinson, approval of the 24 end-of-year budget amendments.
So what I'd ask the board is that each year we have this meeting as late in June as possible because it's the end of our fiscal year. And so it allows us to come up with as close budget numbers as we can. But we do have a couple things we have to clean up. So the first thing I would ask for is a motion from the board. I would recommend that the Board of Education approve the completion of the payment of fiscal year 2024 district expenses through June 30th. So what you're doing is giving us permission to continue to spend money until the end of the year as our bills come in so we can clean those off the books this year. And then of course we'll have records of that to bring in the next meeting as well. But we would ask for a motion to approve that as presented.
So moved.
First by Jill, second by Darren. Any questions? All those in favor? That passes 7-0.
Secondly, I would recommend the Board of Education approve to amend the fiscal year 2024 district budgeted revenues and expenditures to actual amounts effective June 30th. What this will do is whatever our budget was, we're going to have our actuals. We want to amend the budget to our actuals on the last day of the fiscal year so that we can then submit that to the state and for our auditor.
So moved.
First by Jill, second by Troy.
Me first, Hannah.
Oh, it's you two need to change your voices up a little. Just
Okay. Just me.
Galen. All right. Any questions on that? All those in favor? That passes 7-0. All right. Item 2.
Item 2, we have our salary schedules for all employees. This would be certified, classified, and administrative, as well as technical, our technology, and our parents as teachers. Those are on a separate scale. So at each of those scales here, I can go through some of the highlights here. The biggest thing,
Got it. Oh, you're the controller.
I'm now, how's that?
Thanks for ratting on him, Leroy.
Get him, Leroy. Tell him, Leroy.
Good, you just clicked on it, good, I see how you are. So if you take a look at classified salaries, this is probably the big expense we had when it came to increasing staff salaries this year is our classified. The biggest aspect is raising the minimums. So anywhere where there's a $12 minimum, we raised that to $14. And then you got the subsequent increases as they went down the scale. We did shrink some of the step changes so that you may not get a full not everybody's getting a $2 raise, but everybody is benefiting from the lower minimums and no one is getting less because of this. So what we try to do is make ourselves more competitive, especially at the lower end, because people can go work at Walmart in town or anywhere else really and probably make more than $12 an hour. Even at $14 an hour, we're going to struggle, but we have to start chunking away and making this a more competitive option for people who want to work here. So we're going to have to continue to work on that, but this was about the most we could afford given this year to try to put as much into that classified salary as possible. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have specific to classified salaries here or how we came up with that number. Otherwise, I can move on to the next one. Okay. The next page, we have our certified salary scale. So we meet with our district, what do we call them? The district leadership team, is that our name for it now? And it's comprised of people from each building. We have classified, certified on it. We have administrators. There's a wide, we have some secretaries who participate in that meeting, and we talk about benefits, we talk about salaries, we talk about what they'd like to see, what they'd like to see different, what can we do to make it a more competitive salary for people wanting to stay here and finish their careers here. And one of the things they ask for is to try to have it as uniform as possible throughout the scale. We were taking a look at trying to add $1,000 to the base. We were at $39,000 for beginning teacher salary last year, and we were going to move that to 40. Well, at 40, that was just going to be the new state minimum that the state's putting out, and we were going to have the same beginning salary as smaller schools to our north and to our east. And honestly, that's not a place we wanted to be in. We want to try to attract some of those people who want to come here to make more money the same way that the bigger schools in the city try to do the same thing to us. The proposal I came up with was to bump the minimum from $39,000 up to $42,000. If we would have simply done that and then carried it all the way through the scale, it would have cost about $1.7 million. We didn't have that in the budget. So what we did is we shrunk the first 5 steps down to just being $100 each, so that we could actually afford it. This was about $800,000 change here. But no one will do worse because of this. Anybody in those first 5 years is still going to be better in those 5 years. They will have made more than if we didn't do this. So I understand that a year from now, somebody will say, wait a minute, it's only going up $100. You're correct, but you're also gaining an additional $3,000 that you wouldn't have before. We just have to be able to communicate that. But no one on this scale will get less than $1,000. So It does work out different percentage-wise. Obviously, it's a lower percentage increase the more you make, because it's a set amount of $1,000. But again, that is also something that the staff said they would rather see it more uniform. So we're trying to accomplish many things here, but the biggest thing was to try to be more competitive on the low end. I will tell you that we are going to have, because of Senate Bill 727, we will have to add 7 days to our calendar next year, or we will forfeit 1% of our revenues, which is not something we want to do.
Not next year, the year after.
No, we'll actually, we're going to lose it this year. We'd already set our calendar. We'd already set the calendar, so there's nothing we can do about it. And so we're going to lose about $170,000 because our calendar is shorter. But the cost to have got that money back would have cost us more to have to pay everybody that at this time. So we already know this is coming. So next year, we're going to have to plan a calendar around a minimum of 169 days. So we're going to have to add 7 days. We've got some different strategies and different ideas we have of how we think we can do that and limit some of the costs associated with it, but still meet all the requirements so that we don't forego any money moving forward.
And we're not the only district that will have to do that, correct?
Well, every district will have to do it. We're unique in somewhat, as very few people have done what we've done, where we lengthened the day and shortened it because it was hours generated. We did it as a money-saving thing the last 6 years, I think now. But we're going to have to get away from that now. We're going to have to go at least to their minimum.
So they went to days, and then went to hours, and now they're making.
Correct. So it's
going to shorten the school day back to what it used to be.
That's something that the committee, I'm going to let them make up those decisions after they talk, get input from stakeholders. But
I think a little easier to take.
It's likely that before a classified staff would work 7 hours a day, and then we lengthened the day, we made it to 7.5, and we may have to go back down to 7 hours where we shorten the day a half hour. But again, I don't want to dictate what the committee's recommendations are, so I definitely want to keep an open mind going into it, because maybe there's a different solution that's even better, I don't know. But those will all be under consideration, yes. So this was the best approach we had, trying to come up with a budget that we thought we could afford and still try to move the needle as much as humanly possible. It's still going to need work. This is still not going to be competitive with larger suburban school districts. Okay, we're a little bit better on the low end now. We're more competitive with Kearney, Smithville, and Platte County with going to 42. Problem is they're all doing a 6% raise this year, so they're going to jump right out in front of us again. We're always going to be playing catch up. So the only way we're going to be competitive moving forward is about 75 to 80% of all of our costs are from staff. There really isn't any money in the budget that makes a difference outside of these salary scales, to be honest. So we either have to have fewer staff or we have to raise taxes. Those are the only levers we have to push and pull. So we're going to have to make those decisions moving forward in the next year or two. But that's kind of the big budget constraints that are going. But this is a fitting time to bring that up because they did talk about the Senate bill and how that's going to change things for us. Because we're going to have to add work days. But we can't turn around and say, okay, instead of 42, it's 50. We wouldn't be able to afford that.
Well, I think too, the general public sometimes doesn't realize that salaries come from a separate fund other than like building, because they see new schools and they think,
Sure.
You've built these new schools, why can't you pay your teachers more?
Right.
And I find myself explaining because that comes from a separate fund.
Correct.
So
That's when we sell, that's why it's a bond issue, right? We go out and sell bonds and that money specifically towards a building. I cannot use that money for staff. Legally, you cannot do that. So there is no option for that. The only options we have is to increase our attendance, have more students come here, move here. That would generate more revenues. Or we can reduce the number of people that we're paying. That would increase our money available to us. Or increase taxes. Those are the options. And we're going to have to look at all of those and come up with the best decision. So, but it is going to be a challenge moving forward. So any questions on the certified? Okay. And on next here, since I can't count Leroy again, administrator's salary schedule.
Did you say that about Leroy?
I didn't know. Did I say it out loud?
Did you say that about Leroy?
Is this my copy? This is we did a 3%. So I tried to figure out percentage-wise what was a reasonable raise for people that aren't going to have different subject of this, that, and the other. So 3% worked here. We didn't change any of the steps. We just did a simple 3% on the very first line and then carried everything else forward as it is. And that's all we did. We did the same thing with technology. We did the same thing with parents as teachers. So they're really set up at a 3% increase. So any questions on those? I had a good question and an email about the budget earlier and asked about how much of the money that went into raises went to the different groups. And so I just did some quick work on my spreadsheet to figure that out, and it was 49% of all the money towards new salaries going to teachers, 43.5% was going to classified staff, and 7.5% were going to admin. That was kind of how the breakdown, the new monies that were put into the salary scales. So, questions on that one?
How competitive are we, particularly at the entry-level administrative jobs, like the assistant principals, for example?
Yeah.
Those numbers still seem pretty low compared to...
That's a tough one to answer, and I'll tell you why. If you get to really small schools, they don't have some of these positions.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. I mean, like comparable schools.
So if you go comparable schools, honestly, people pay better in Kearney and Platte County and Liberty and North Kansas City and Park Hill.
Those, yeah, obviously.
Those are who we compete with. We do not compete with those very well when it comes to salaries. So I think myself and Smithville, I think we're the two lowest paid superintendents. And I would say high school principals in some of those larger districts are making more than our assistant
Oh,
superintendents.
I know that, yeah.
Right,
I was
so,
thinking specifically like Kearney, Smithville, districts that are roughly our size, roughly our, I mean, there's no exact copy. But like Trey was saying, Smithville is a very close comparison to us.
we used to be bigger than that, they've now surpassed us. So now we're the smallest across the 92 highway corridor. But, we're not losing people because of money. But at the same time, we offer some things other people don't. Our schedule is very appealing to administrators. The supervision requirements are very appealing to our administrators. And hopefully the way we treat them, give them opportunities, there's obviously we've promoted from within, so there's been a lot of opportunities for people for reason why they stay here. So we try to look at some of the non-financial components to say what's holistically keeping people here. We also have a good benefits package. I think our benefits actually are very competitive compared to anyone else. Our pay probably lags a little bit, but I think this is a really good step. And I think as long as we stick with it at some small percentage each year, I think that we're going to be okay. Any questions on those? I have the PAT technology. I did the same thing. I tried to bump these up at 3% and make some adjustments. The important thing with these is I just wanted to make sure no matter how we did the adjustments and added things on, you go through line by line and cell by cell to make sure nobody is not getting their due when it comes to this. So we make sure that, and sometimes even if we make a mistake in a cell, we realize that once we start getting payroll done, we'll come back and say, hey, we made a mistake, we have to change this, we need your approval. But we feel very confident that this is going to be manageable for this year's budget. But I do need a motion to approve the salary scales as presented.
Did you add steps for Brian?
We do that actually, so.
That's because it only goes so far, and the guy's been here for 72 years.
It's a good question. So we made this decision. Now different schools handle this differently. Some people, once you get to line 30, you just stay at that line. You're there. That's where you get. We have not chosen that approach because we want to incentivize people to stay longer because it's hard to find people. So what we do is we do give steps past 30. So yes, Brian is on a whole different scale, but
He's got his own schedule.
we have about 6 or 7 people that have been here more than that. So they actually, we do carry forward multiple steps for those people so that they are encouraged to stay and are given a reason why they can't. That's just been an approach that we've taken on how we wanted to treat people who've been here a long time.
I move to approve the salary schedules.
First, we have a second.
Second.
Second by Kayla. Open to questions, comments.
If we were to approve the salary schedule, is this the opportunity to ask questions about the salary, like the line items in the overall budget, or is this just specific to the schedules as it relates to what was presented?
This is just specific to these salary schedules,
Okay.
but if you want to bring those up now, we could do that. Once these are approved, if you wanted,
Then that does carry over to that.
like that line item would have been already approved too,
Yeah.
not the overall budget.
Yeah, but I mean, these numbers are going to feed into that. So, that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense.
It's kind of a.
But yeah,
Of the budget overage on the the budget schedule
Yes.
on the line items, the breakouts. Can you share like what percentage of the overage falls into CO? What percentage of the overage is in building admin? And what percentage of the overage is like teachers? And not like the 3%, the 3%, not the 49%, you know, that you just presented.
What do you mean by overages?
So like the overage on the budget from last year based on last year's. So if we just went by steps and we look at 1, 2, 3, 4 of you, and let's assume that maybe there's like a $3,000 to $5,000 increase per year. I don't know what the number is, right? But would it be fair to say of the $200,000, 15 of that extra is coming from CO? Or would you say that number is larger?
Well, I think it's going to depend on what the individual salaries are and where they fall in their steps of what that's going to be. So let's go to one and just we'll just do a mock one here. So let's say assistant superintendent, right? So if you're going from out of step 1, for instance, I know that last year that was 103,000, right? So it went from 103 and change, I don't know what it was after that, but to 106.96. So that'd be about a $3,000.
Right. So
right?
Do we think it's around that?
So I would say in between us, you have. I'm not on this scale, so I wouldn't be included in there. But you'd have these 3 would all be on there. And so depending on what step they're on, let's just say, I don't even know where they are off the top of my head. Let's say it's 15. Let's pick somewhere in the middle, right? So at 140. They're all going to be Did you approve that?
Yeah.
Well, you want me to do, how about 10 then? Does that work better? So
Still a little long, but.
if that's 131,000, so before, that's probably closer to 3,500, maybe 4,000. Would be that type of a.
Is there ever a space in which we, like, anyone within the district doesn't just automatically move the step?
Well, that's determined by the board, so the board actually has to make a motion to approve steps, and that's given every year. I would always recommend that you give a step. It is a nightmare if you don't, but we have done that before. In the past, we have not given a step before in order to save that money. It costs about $400,000 to give a step.
And that is a morale killer.
Well, I'm just gonna go all the way in, and you guys are gonna be like, here she goes, right? So, is there ever a time in which, because when you look at DESE and our teachers are just barely right now just making above state average. I know we're not supposed to compare against state average because we're 400, you know, like we're up in the top part. The teachers and the educators are just barely above, but our administration is more significantly above. Like they're not in line. If you look across like the state, if the administrators are down, typically the teachers are down. If teachers are up, you know. But in Excelsior Springs, it seems like there's a little bit more disparity. And so, is there ever a time of which, and it's probably not today, and it won't be today because I'm one vote. I know all of that. But is there ever a time of which you give your teachers the bump because in other schedules a bump because we're in such a crisis mode of like trying to solve for that? You guys might disagree, and I also know we don't align across our peers. We just spoke of that. What you make compared to what your peers make, what you guys make. But is there ever a place in which you guys would present that you don't, or the building admins don't get the step, but the teachers do, just to like push more money into the crisis?
I understand the sentiment to it, but from a practicality standpoint, the numbers aren't there. Like the amount of money that we're talking putting into administrative salaries wouldn't make a dent or a difference if we threw it onto the teacher's salary because of the sheer numbers of them.
And that's what I was trying to get us to like acknowledge up front. Like that was my gut. Like how can, like maybe we don't approve this, or Tracy votes no for this and this, right? But when I started to look at the steps and we're like 3,000, 5,000, like we're looking for $1 million.
Correct.
We're not looking for $15,000. And so I just think it's important to just bring awareness to yes, we could perhaps let that go, but it doesn't significant, it doesn't make the difference. And then back to what Troy said, as it relates to morale, you guys are gonna say kick rocks because you wanted your 3 or 5, right? So I'm just saying it out loud so that way our community can hear it, we can think of it differently. Yes, we all know that Excelsior Springs, you know, admin is up a little bit more than our teachers are up, not a little bit, a bit more, right? And should we try to right size that? Yes, and maybe we can one day with a tax, you know, or something, but today we can't really solve for that, correct? Do we all agree with that?
Yes. Can you go to the teacher?
This one?
We don't have the doctor.
The doctorate one is actually included on this level. It just adds $4,500. You get a $4,500 stipend if you have a doctorate over here.
So, Tracy, did you know that there's a doctorate stipend? So if you teach, like Dr. Howe teaches science, he has his doctorate, so he gets, I don't know what step he's on. He's probably on 30 or 30. Anyway, he gets another $4,500 on top of what's on that salary.
So he's making
schedule
85 grand.
because he's got his doctorate.
And then he also gets another $5,000 for career ladder.
So he's making 90.
Correct.
Which
But I didn't know
is
if you knew about
within
the
a few
doctorate
dollars of what a lot of these guys are making. And they all have their doctorates, obviously.
Anecdotally, it sounds like a lot of people are kind of snubbing, in some ways, the career ladder here in our district because of the things of which we're requiring them to do, versus they're already giving so much of their time, they're out, they're already given a lot outside, but now it has to be tied to tutoring. I get it, I know why, I was in the building, get it, right? Like, it has to be tied to certain things, and so I know of a good handful that have said, no, we're passing, because their personal time is just worth more to them than the $5,000. And so while, yes, it is there, I think they're just wanting to be compensated for the time of which they're giving in the classroom and not requiring more of their life.
I completely agree with that. It's just, where do you come up with that additional money to do it? Like, that's the problem is.
Because they make us from the state.
Well, there's
substantial
rules in the
amount
state
of
yet.
that.
So we put in about $450,000 to $500,000 for career ladder, and the state puts in another $700,000. So we could not do career ladder. We could get rid of that, and then we would have. But unless we use that money that our portion is to somehow get them, like, what are we going to pay them for? Or do we just take that money and put it in the salary schedule and say we're not doing tutoring or anything anymore? We can get rid of all that stuff and just put it in the salary schedule. It'll still be less money in their pockets available to them. So the reason why we chose to do it is because it maximized how much money we could get to teachers. Because a lot of them were doing these extra things anyway, so we were thinking, hey, this is a great opportunity for all the work you're doing outside of class. You can earn these things. But you're right, when it comes from the state, it comes with some strings. But that's certainly something we can do in the future. We can always evaluate that.
And can we talk more to the teachers about, and you guys probably do, and maybe they're like choosing what they do and don't want to hear. But can we just make sure that they know that it's not coming from you, it's not coming from the board, and it's not coming from central office, that these extra stipulations to earn this extra $5,000, it's not from us, but I think it is, because I think we're all if we're being real, I think that we're all trying to self-serve because we have other goals that we need to make, and so we're trying to get them to lean into the goals of which we're trying to accomplish, and then we're going to pay you. I just think there has to be a better balance, because I think we're forcing them into things that they're not comfortable with, and so now we're going to have the mass exodus of, like, you can take your $5,000 and I don't need it because my time with my family is more valuable.
Well, and I think DESE has gotten stricter too with the requirements for career ladder. So much of it isn't even at the district level now that they're saying like a certain percentage of it has to be student contact. It has to be student tutoring. I mean, it is specific to that. So, I mean, sometimes some of the things are really out of our control at the district level. A lot of it's controlled by DESE.
Yeah, I agree with you, but we also know that there are new things that came in that I do think we can lean into that are during the school hours and the mentoring and things like that. There are other things that we can offer to our teachers as well. I I've said it, you guys get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think every one of us wants to maximize how much our staff are able to earn as much as humanly possible. If you take a look, we're not building up a reserve of cash. We try to take as much money as we possibly can out of our budget and put it into people's hands every chance we get. The reason we went with Career Ladder, even though it did have some strings to it, is just put more money in their pockets. If that's not effective, if people don't want to do it, we don't see it, we won't continue it. The problem is we won't have as much money to work with in those areas that we still probably want to offer. But 100%, I think we evaluate that year to year.
And hopefully controlling what we put on their plates. Like,
Right.
I think they're at their limit.
Yeah. Well, and we talk about
They
that a
don't
lot.
need one more thing.
Right.
Well, in Park Hill, I was required to do 4 hours of tutoring a month, and I wasn't compensated a dime for it. It fell within the negotiated purview of our agreement because we had collective bargaining.
Right.
And, it wasn't my favorite thing to do either, and I didn't pay a nickel for it. So, we were begging for Career Ladder because they used to have it.
Yeah.
So, better $5,000 than nothing.
I'm going to be honest with you guys, this is going to be ongoing discussions. This isn't going anywhere. It's going to get worse, right? It's going to become more difficult. We're going to struggle to keep people and have people in our classrooms working with our kids because we're not competitive with private industry. I can be competitive all day long with Lhasa and Richmond and Oric, but I can't with the bigger schools and I can't with private industry. So until we really take this seriously, and it's not probably going to come from the state, to be honest.
It's going to have to come from the community.
It's going to have to come from the community.
Being willing to pay the teachers who teach their own children.
Correct.
Grandchildren.
The community's going to get what the community wants and values. And what we have to do is do the best what we have with what we have.
Until we can get that through.
Correct. So this is what I believe is the best we can do. This is pushing the envelope. I mean, if we get into the budget part, I'm pushing the envelope a little bit here. I think we can pull it off. If we can't, we're still going to be okay. That's why I put it where it is. But I can't go another year without trying to make improvements on these salaries.
Remind me, what are you projecting for reserves at the end of the fiscal year?
At the end of next year, as it currently stands today, it would be between 17.5% and 18.5%. Now, that being said, I'm hopeful. There's still another week. I can get some money coming in. We're maybe $8 million. I've told you guys before, $8 million is what I expect to have in the bank in funds 1 and 2 at the end of every year when I start with. If we come short of that, I'm further behind before I get started. If I come in with a couple extra checks late, I'll be a little bit better off. But that's kind of where
get your checks in.
I know.
Yeah, that's actually where they come from. Those are the ones I'm
I
waiting.
love those emails that say, I just did this. I
Immediately follow it.
Sometimes the Career Center might have some things too from grant reimbursements.
Job Corps, as they ramp up, are we looking at some better numbers there this year?
We are, and we're also, Mr. Ruby has done a really good job working with them on their reporting. It's not always easy, but we're trying to do a better job of accounting for when they're here, especially during the summer, get more summer attendance. We changed our summer school and you're going to hear about that tonight, and hopefully we'll see how it went or didn't go. I'm curious to see myself. But we put a lot more emphasis on putting a lot more trips, more fun things in the summer school, getting that attendance up. This summer school is the first attendance period we've ever had where we're going to be on the formula. This summer counted for formula, didn't count for hold harmless. So the goal was to try to get as many kids as possible, not just to enroll, but to stay through the system, which has always been hard for us. But we're doing everything we can as far as reporting, DESE, core data, and mostly attendance, because that's going to help us with our bottom line on revenues, and that's just more money we can put into staff. That helps.
Any further questions on the salary schedules? Good, everybody good? All right, we had a first and a second. We had discussion, all those in favor? That passes 7-0. All right, next up is...
It's me again.
Budget.
So I just want to highlight a couple things in the letter that I put on here for the book that I put together. You guys give me feedback too if you like the book, don't like how it's put together. I try to do it in a way that kind of puts it at a level that you can understand it, follow it, but also has some detail to it, shows you some comparisons.
It's better than all those endless lines.
Oh, did I skip over one?
Oh, I was
That
thinking
was
we did too,
traceable.
but I was thinking that
Oh.
step was included in the schedule. So.
Yeah, so
Move to approve the salary step.
Okay, let me get back to that. So moved.
Second?
Yep.
First by Troy, second by Kate.
Second by me.
You go, Letty. You and I pull contact.
Oh, we switched it?
No, you can go back to your budget. All right, any questions on the salaries,
We all say budget, so it's hard to find.
salary step increase?
There it is.
All right, all those in favor? And that passes 7-0. Sorry about that, I was thinking part of the
You. Keep us out of trouble. I just wanted to highlight a couple things here in the letter, especially for the public if they want to hear and know. But main aspects of what it's going to cost is we did raise the minimum from $12 to $14 an hour on classified staff. We did raise the starting base $3,000. Every person got at least a $1,000 raise on a teacher salary scale. We did a 3% to other 12-month employees, and that was kind of where we started. But we also raised our health insurance contributions from $575 to $600 because we did have a decent increase in what our health insurance premiums were going to be. We also modified some of the plan offerings. You're going to see that continue when it comes to benefit offerings. We also do pay, if any staff member is a benefit eligible staff member, wants to join the community center, we do pay for that. We do spend it, it's about $50 a month per employee who takes advantage of it. If they don't take advantage of it, we don't get charged or paid. That's a benefit that we took on a few years ago for staff health, morale, and try to keep our insurance rates lower. That is something that we could always get rid of in the future if we determine that's just a nice need. We'd rather have that money put in salaries, we could do that. Career ladder, we talked about a little bit. The reason why we chose that, it allows us more money to put towards teachers. But you're right, it does come with some strings. I get that piece of it. But that's something we can talk about with our staff. I think when we have our staff meetings, we can get feedback and we can survey. What else was on there that were kind of big hitters? That's kind of it from the front page. Really, the entire budget is centered around staff pay. Everything else we tried to limit, reduce, or keep the same when it came to that other 20% that I was talking about. The problem is I can't control inflation. Inflation is really difficult for us because we're not receiving additional revenues, but we do have additional expenses. Water bills are higher, electricity is higher, all of our contracted services are higher, our busing is more expensive, our food service is more expensive, the food itself to purchase is more expensive. So all of those things we're trying to eat and keep it and not raise any of those budgets. We're just trying to be a little bit smarter, tighter, cut a few things back so that that's not a bear on when it comes to salaries. So that's what I think you'll see in this budget. If you want to take a look real quick at some of the changes, I want to highlight just a couple important parts. It's difficult to look at this and get a comparison over the last 5 years because of what COVID did. So COVID introduced this huge influx of federal money through ESSER. Okay? So you hear about ESSER, and what it was, the federal government came up with ways to try to keep the economy going, keep things pushing, and they sent a lot of money to schools to help with a lot of learning loss. We're staying at home, we're online learning, how do you still provide food service when there's no school in session? So when you take a look at why some of these things have dropped off, you're like, whoa, a lot of money is coming out of our system. It's just because we're not getting that federal or county money anymore. Now we were scheduled to get about $1.2 million from the Clay County Children's Fund this year. The problem is we weren't able to bill $1.2 million because they couldn't staff it. So then the Children's their board that oversees that came back and said, well, if you can't fill it all, then we don't have to budget that much for you. So they cut our budget back down from $1.2 million, and I'm going to say to about $600,000. So we lost $600,000 from Children's Fund, just like that. All that's going to mean, we're not going to be able to provide those services. We're going to cut services of that $600,000 because it's all outside people for behavior intervention, special needs, additional services. We're going to have to reduce some of the services to our kids because we can't pick that up. So those are some of the big points that you'll see when it comes. I think we're going to be okay once we get on the formula, once we're on it for a year or two and understand how it works and we kind of get better at it. Honestly, we don't have the data points now to be very successful, so a lot of this is really best guesses off similar school districts to us that I'm trying to model after. The problem is you can't, because I can find someone my size, but they have different free and reduced lunch. They have different IDEA. Those are compensated differently. There's multipliers that are put onto those. Dr. Bullimore and I did go and meet with some experts on the matter of trying to estimate our ADA with DESE. We've never done that before. We are going to do that this year. What it'll allow us to do is get an increased multiplier of how much money the state reimburses us for some subgroups, specifically free and reduced and IDEA. We're going to get paid more money from the state in those areas by doing our estimated ADA. We're trying to increase our numbers in Job Corps. We're trying to increase our summer school numbers. We're doing everything we possibly can to try to make sure that our revenues are going to be at a level that help us move forward. I'm not worried about the expenses. I'm really not. I'm worried about the revenues. So I'm optimistic that it's all going to work out, but I've put together a budget that even if it doesn't, I think this is worst case scenario, and it's very manageable even if it happens this way. But one of the things I like to tell cabinet members is if we're going to make a decision on making cuts or reducing programs or services or staff, I would rather do that 1 year too late than 1 year too early. And the reason is there's too many unknowns and too many variables to know what's going to happen with school finance. We have appropriations from the state legislature. We don't know what they're going to set the SAT at and how they're going to fund it. But if we find out that we make a mistake, that's what our reserves are for. Let's use our reserves for their intended purpose, and that's to get through difficult and unknown times. If we see a trend moving in a direction where we can't sustain that, that's when I think we should either cut or reduce because we have to, not because we think we have to. And that's kind of the difference I'd like to report when I put a budget in. So we split all these revenues and expenditures out for you. It lists them different by buildings. It's important to know too that sometimes those drops are one-offs, right? So we built a weight room. Weight room was like $350,000, $400,000. That's not going to be on the budget this year, so that's a subtraction. It doesn't mean we're offering less things for our kids. They still have all the same activities. We're just not investing in another weight room because we already did it. So we do have some one-offs. And we do get surprises. Today, I found out that Elkhorn parking lot, we had a budget for $125,000. We had a competitive bid put in for that. They got out there and it crumbled underneath of them, and they can't do an overlay. They're going to have to redo the whole thing and do dirt work underneath. It doubled the cost. So now it's $250,000. That just, boom, happened. So I've got to wait. I got that figured out. I think we're going to be fine with it, but that was kind of low. So those things pop up too, but we'll be fine. Some of the other things, the Career Center is a really interesting time right now. Career Center, it's kind of an exciting time. There's a lot of emphasis at the state legislature put into the career centers and VOTEC and trades in general. So there's a lot of money coming in. We are going to try for a grant that's going to put a welding program in our Career Center. So we've already worked with architects and builders, talk about costs for that, come up with different possible budgets if we're able to secure that funding. But also we had a couple retirees from 3 of our prominent programs over there in the last 2 years. So we've got new people coming in. So they're going to have to do some adjustments when it comes to community ed and some of the night classes and programs. Some of those are going to change and evolve. But I think it's all going to work out. I think if we add a new program like a welding, I think that's going to be extremely popular. I think there's a lot of interest in something like that, and it's going to be good for our APR. So I would ask for a little bit of grace when it comes to the Career Center. I feel very confident that Mr. Ruby has his arms around that. He's going to get that moving in the right direction. But he's also working with completely new staff and trying to incorporate them in multiple ways. And it's going to take a year or so to get that all ironed out. Okay. Overall, we're projected to have a deficit budget for next year. I think we are going to spend a little bit of our reserves. We might lose 1 to 2% reserves. Honestly, I think that's completely acceptable. I know that's a little bit lower than what the board wants when everything's going well. But I think in a highly uncertain time, like this year is going to be when it comes to revenues, I think that's a pretty good expectation. I think that's a fair number. I'm optimistic that it's going to come in better than that. But I don't want to overinflate the revenues just to say, oh, look how close and balanced it is, and then disappoint you at the end of the year. I would much rather overestimate expenses, underestimate revenues, and come in with a positive next year, because that's going to have a better impact. We'll take that chunk of money and put it towards staff. So that is kind of my summary overall. I can talk more about debt schedules and Fund 3. We can talk about Fund 4. What's paid out of that, why we pay out of those, but basically you know this. Fund 3 is paying for Cornerstone. Fund 4 is paying for Lewis. One's a bond, one's a lease purchase. So anytime you see Fund 4, that's how we pay for Elkhorn parking lot. That's how we build Lewis. Fund 3 is how we build Cornerstone, and we're still going to pay that off until those bonds are repaid. Does that make sense? Just from a high level? But that's what the next pages are when you talk about your debt schedule. That's all listed in here. There's an informational demographics section. I added that, and I tried to put a little table of contents in the back, or what do you call it, a glossary, just some terms, just so sometimes you see stuff and you're like, what the heck are they talking about? If that's advantageous, great. If it's not, I can take it out going forward, whatever you guys think. But this is what our team has come up with, and it's what we recommend, and it's what we're going to try to work towards and make sure this is what's best for our staff, but most importantly, what's best for our kids.
Much easier to understand than just a limitless bunch of line items that, you know, how much they spend on balloons that, you know.
Right.
At the early
Well,
childhood.
what you have to understand is this is a summary of a spreadsheet I have that is thousands and
Yes.
thousands of lines.
Which we used to get access to, and it was just.
There's no way you can go through it.
Meaningless, really.
Well, you didn't know what the key codes were.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was like, blah, 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 blah. What's that? What building? What program? What activity? What?
And we can get to other stuff if there's specific questions, but I just thought this was at a good level that it kind of broke it down for people. You can always amend that if you guys need to.
What, now it won't affect us next year, would be negatively with Senate Bill 190, but the next budget year, if homes appreciate, assessments go up, and if that's
Seniors?
Yeah,
Yes.
and we're locked into 25 assessed values when they've gone up, whatever. So I guess we just always go worst case scenario based off of what we got the year before.
Yeah, we don't really know the impact that's going to. So if you guys don't know about it, there was legislation passed that allows for eligible senior citizens to have their taxes frozen. So the property taxes would freeze at a certain level. So what Mr. President here is referring to is that as those go up, we're losing income opportunities. The expenses for us are continuing to go up, but our revenues won't be increasing as much, and that's going to be a drain on what we're able to do moving forward. There is no answer for that. We've actually talked to the county commissioners, and we've had all the superintendents of Northland. I sat there myself, and they tried to come up with a spreadsheet and showed us, and it took 3 or 4 questions from us, and it shot everything. Like, oh, we didn't think of that. And they had to go back. They never came back to us with an answer.
But they passed it, didn't
They passed it anyway. We just don't know what that impact is going to be, but it will have a negative impact on schools and hospitals and ambulance, any taxi city, all of it's going to. I don't know how bad it's going to be. Honestly, for areas that are growing, it's probably not going to be an issue at all. So I don't know if Liberty or North Kansas City or Park Hill is going to care. I think people like us and Smithville lost some money.
Small rural communities, it's going to be devastating.
Correct.
Well,
That's where all their tax base is.
And the $1 million question comes is, it'll go to court. There'll be a lawsuit as soon as a district or a city or somebody is harmed. Basically, they lose money, they're going to file a suit.
Right.
And then it's just how long is that going to take to drag?
Well, it's not really senior citizens, isn't it? Like
62, I think. I think they filed an amendment, and now it's just, you just have to be a certain age.
Yeah.
62 or 65, I don't remember which one. But it used to be you had to be on Social Security, you had to make an income less than whatever. But now it's just, you're just a certain age.
The reason why they changed that actually came from one of our meetings, and it is not done that way in other counties that are doing it, but Clay County took our recommendation because teachers wouldn't have been eligible for it because they're not on Social Security.
Right.
So we had to change it to be an age so that teachers specifically would be eligible.
Well, didn't the state file an amendment to the bill too?
Oh, did they?
Yeah, I think, and I don't know if it passed, no, not much passed, but I know there was an amendment to change it to just an age.
So I would ask the board for approval of the 24-25 budget as presented. Unless you have any more questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
I have a food service question.
Okay,
Oh, I
what's up?
love these.
Do we have a motion to approve the
So
budget?
moved.
First by Troy, do we have a second?
Second.
Is it Darren? Sorry. All right, now, discussion,
Now your
questions.
On the food service, before I joined the board, it was maybe like one meeting earlier. It was presented that we were gonna stay with Airmark, and then it was like maybe 5 years, but you could renew year over year, something like that, I don't know.
Right.
At that time, was it presented what the increase would be to the budget at that time, and then the board said yes? Or did we not have the numbers, then we were just moving off of just the fact that we wanted to stay with Airmark because of,
Right.
we liked doing business with them?
No, it comes back as, so I want to say that there were, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's 4 or 5 companies wanted to get our business for that. And so we went to a competitive bidding process where we actually took the lowest bid.
So that $900,000 more than what we paid last year is the lowest bid.
It was the lowest bid.
And that was actually $1 million cheaper than any of the comparative schools that I went to bid with.
Wow, I just think it's good for people to know that because,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of criticism around some of our menu items or like, are we getting good service from that? And then to see the budget and to be like, whoa, that's a lot more than we paid last year, but it's the best offer that we had for what fits within our budget right now.
And honestly, it's much better than a lot of other schools got.
Wow.
I like to think that we're a loss leader when it comes to Aramark because they want a foothold in Kansas City. And there's now 2 schools in all of Kansas City. We were the first, but they use us as a marketing way to try to get into all the other schools. And so they're deliberately coming in with really good rates for us relative to everybody else. For the sole purposes, they're trying to get more business around here. So we're taking advantage of that. And I tell them that all the time, they know it. But they seem to like us and they're happy to be here and I think they're going to try to get more schools.
I did a lot of schmoozing.
Yes.
To try and get the lowest.
Yeah.
And it's the food service is one of the most highly controlled bid process by the state. And number 1 overall has to be cost, right, and savings to the district. So it's taken into account.
It's crazy, I know. I just was saying, and then you think when you go to the grocery store and you spend, and you walk in with everything in one hand, you're just like, $100.
And the districts that still do their own food service have had a very rough time. Because they're just, gosh.
I don't want to go back to that. It's so much work for people. It's a lot.
Even a big district, and we have the advantage of having a big company where, yeah, it's a big school district, but they're small potatoes compared to Aramark or, or Oakland or any of those.
It's a nice thing about Aramark is during COVID, actually, we were able to continue to get supply chain food here. And there were a lot of schools that had to go out and like go to Costco and buy stuff just to feed their schools. And we were lucky to get through that because they were such a big company. They had a different relationship with suppliers.
I just want to say, I think that you guys did a good job of like trying to find the places to reduce the budget. You can tell that there was a lot of effort put into it. I don't understand the world of which you present a budget that has more expenses than revenues. Mark would always tell me when we worked together at the Career Center, Tracy's not corporate, Tracy's not corporate. And so I'm trying to adjust to that, but it looks like you guys really put a lot of effort into it. I wish we could figure out the salaries for the teachers, but it is what it is.
Well, I think the whole key to it is once we make this transition onto the formula, we're going to have a better idea. But we're going to have to continue to attack that because we need that minimum needs to get up to 50,000.
We've been attacking that for 4 years. I mean, it's just as soon as you think you're in the top 5 in the area, well, they turn around and bump theirs up, and now you're right back where you're right back at the bottom.
The key is we're never going to be able to. We don't have the tax base to pay more than North Kansas City or Liberty or Park Hill. They're going to be a different category. What we have to do is we have to stay competitive with Kearney, Smithville, Platte County. We have to be competitive with them, and we have to pay more than Lawson, Richmond, Warwick. Like that should be the bare minimum of any discussion we ever have. Is we need to be more than those 3, in line with those 3, and try to keep up with them best we can, but we won't. So I think if we keep that mentality, we're going to do well for our people.
And this is probably the first budget since I've been on the board that we've deficits been out of the gate.
Out of the gate.
I mean,
We're
knowing that we were probably going to. I'm not saying we haven't deficit spent in prior years, but not at budget approval time.
The tough part
It feels so wrong.
It does. I agree with you.
so wrong.
It's like, how can you do that?
But that's what our reserves are for.
That's what it's for.
Our reserves are there for exactly this reason.
I mean, we could not, but then we'd be at 39 or 40,000 for base, and I mean,
Right, you could not give a step, you could not increase the salaries. That would be the only way to balance it. But I don't recommend that because I think that we may come out of this okay. I just don't want to oversell it at the beginning and fall short $2 million and go, oh, sorry. No, that's not going to be okay with me.
And I know it's for non-educators particularly, it's a complicated notion to get their head around the difference between being held harmless and on the formula. but it's such a huge difference. I mean, it's like a totally different way of accounting.
It's a completely different financial way of being, of how we're gonna receive our revenues, and we've never been on it before.
Yeah.
We just haven't. So it's gonna be an adjustment, and that's okay, but I would rather go into it conservatively. I would rather take my chances and say, hey, it didn't go out as well as we thought, so we dropped down to 17.5%. But it's possible it could come in better, and we end up just right where we were, and it was all okay, and then we can turn around and attack teacher salaries again. So that's really the mentality going into it, but you know, we're gonna manage it best we can. I can tell you now, just in looking at where our finals are projected now, we're projected to be exactly where we were last year. So in this last year, we were able to maintain it almost on the dot. So I'm excited about that. We're not starting from behind.
All right, any other questions, comments? All right, we have a first and a second on the table. All those in favor? And that passes 7-0. Next up, Miss Annalise Tadlock with the summer school update.
All right, to give you summer school numbers and talk to you about budget. So we ran summer school a little bit different this year. We did have 10 buses total for elementary and secondary, and we did run 2 special ed buses. So that was a little bit more than we did last year, so we will have expense in busing. And then we did do a lot of summer school field trips, a lot of field trips. However, the outcome of that, we started with middle school at 219, and we maintained that. And I think the change that we did with the incoming 6th graders throughout the years, even in previous, like even 7-8 years ago before I was even here, we did Jumpstart, and it was 3 days or 3 days and kids here. This year we decided to revamp that and have 6th grade do the entire summer. And we did it as like an encore class, and we did it as an intro to middle school class. So they actually had to practice emailing, practice getting on Canvas. What is e-hall pass going to look like? They had to spend the day as a middle schooler versus what we've done in the past, like lockers, ready to the building. They actually pulled up their own schedule. They talked about grading. We talked about even how to get on Power School. How do you check your grades? How do you advocate? And we did that through the entire program, and we had 106 6th graders, and we ended with probably 98. So the fact that we maintained that was huge success. At the elementary, Jennifer and I talked about each week being themes. So previously in previous districts, she did a theme each week, and then on every Friday they did a field trip. That was huge. So last year we were at like 368. We ended the year with enrollment. This year we ended with 469. So that was a huge, I mean, we ended up with 100 more kids. And 96 of them were incoming kindergartners. So that's huge. So to have that many kids do your Jumpstart programs, that shows. Some things that projecting for next year, because we're gonna end out, like you hear those numbers, but budget-wise, it's gonna end up kind of being the same as we did last year. And here's why, it's because at the high school level, we still ran lunch. That's still gonna be a huge expense. That's still going to, because we had 244 kids in lunch. That's credit recovery, that's credit enhancement, and then getting that ADA back, it's gonna look, which is very similar to what we ran last year. Of course, those kids drop off. You have kids that, oh, I don't want to do health all through 8th grade, you know, and they're getting out and they're thinking, I don't want that on my transcript. They drop. Or you have credit recovery kids in July after finishing June, they drop. So when you see my budget in the July report, it says about 150 kids, because I won't have those final numbers until August, and I won't have those grades. So you could get a $60,000 launch bill. I won't know that until
we will.
Yes, you will. So projecting, but we get that 88 back. So however, when you look at the numbers, it looks almost exactly like it did last year, even though our attendance was up significantly. The other thing, so we need to take in consideration, and talking with like Dr. Wickham, doing an intro to high school, like we did 6th grade, doing an intro and having those freshmen come, like we do ACT prep. We had 60 kids. We've continued. That's been a huge success every single year. And those kids getting to take the ACT for free. We had 67 kids sign up for it. We ended with 59 students with that, and they get a quarter credit. And what we did differently this year, even if they didn't want the quarter credit, if they came, we still counted their attendance, so that still kind of helped us a little bit. Whereas the past, if they didn't, they missed one day, we just let it go. So those are things that if we did like an intro to freshman class, we'd probably get 60 to 70 kids that you could get for 2 weeks to do what does it look like to be a high schooler. Because I know having an incoming high school kid doing health, it's like, what do I do? How do I do Canvas? Those are things that are going to be huge changes for them coming. I think that would be beneficial and kick up your numbers. The other change that we did this year with human performance, we did 3 sessions. So instead of just kids coming in and it being like it's a football program, they come in at 7 o'clock in the morning and they go till 9:30. If you missed it, you missed it. Talking with Coach Daneman, our AD, Mr. Marshall, and Dr. Wickham, we did things very differently, and having all those coaches run different programs. So if a kid showed up at 10 o'clock, they could join Coach Ganser on the soccer team. No, we're not training away, and they could get a quarter credit for PE. So that helped our numbers. And we had 159 kids do that this year for summer. So in the past, it's been about 60. So that's huge. Some other big things that we did, discipline was down due to, I think, all the field trips that we had. In the past, we've had some pretty big disciplinary issues. This year, we really didn't have any. I had 0 at the high school. I had 2, and I had no big suspensions, and neither did Jennifer. So that's huge for us in the past. The other thing that I think was a pretty big success, if you outweigh field trips versus incentives, we did no incentives and we kept our budget pretty scarce. I think we spent $5,000, that's about it when you see the budget report. In the past, we spent about $20,000 on incentives, prizes, things like that. We did nothing, so. I felt like overall it was a huge success. I think that we kept our goal in maintaining kids. Even one day when I sent Dr. Bullimore an email about updating, we had 55 kids absent at the elementary, and we still had 400 students present. And to me, that's huge, so. Any questions? Overall, it's great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. This time I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. First by Caitlin, second by Jill. All those in favor? That passes 7-0. Aye. Have a good evening.
Hydrate, drink water, people. Hot out there.
It's still 110 out.